This is actually my very first trip to Europe. My name is Linda Kately. I'm going to be talking about Illumient today and Lumos. Hello, thank you. This is actually going to end up going in my pocket. So last night I worked really hard to get our first distro of Illumient out. We have, if you go to illumient.org, you can download Illumient. I don't know if you'll want to or not by the time I'm done talking here. So I'm going to talk about where Illumient came from and where we want it to go from here. I'm actually, so Linda Kately, oh, you want to do slides for me too? Wow, sweet. I actually come from Sun. I never had a slide guy when I was there. Even at Oracle with the big bucks, I didn't get a slide guy. It's too bad. So I'm actually employed by a company called Nexenta. And Nexenta was one of the few companies that when Sun open sourced the Open Solaris kernel, they took advantage of that. And so they built out a distribution. There were two guys, and they built a distribution. And they thought, you know, what would make Open Solaris interesting is making it kind of user-friendly to the Linux guys. And the guys who started our company are actually guys that put back the iSCSI stack into the Linux kernel. And they were Debian guys, right? They were Ubuntu guys. And they were kind of intrigued by Open Solaris. And they said, you know, what can we do with Open Solaris that makes it more, for them, right? It's more easy for us to use. And what they did with it was they took the Open Solaris kernel and they added the Debian packaging on top of it. Very quickly, they produced a very large community. At my disposal, I have a database of over 30,000 email addresses of people that had downloaded Nexenta at some point in time since 2005. So yeah, it was started as just a desktop distribution based on Ubuntu. Wanted to be able to have the power of a Solaris kernel with the user land of Debian to make it easier to use for people to transition or to move over into that environment. They quickly found that supporting an operating system isn't a business that they wanted to get into. They didn't want to become canonical, right? They didn't want to do that kind of business. So when the ZFS file system was put back into the Open Solaris, they looked at that as an opportunity to build a storage appliance. And that's all I'm going to talk really about Nexenta is that they built a storage appliance, a small business. The business is growing right now. We grew at 400% last year, you know, based on this kind of idea. But, you know, prior to that, or, you know, as they built this desktop team, they really wanted to create a great server platform. We had this thing called the Nexenta Core platform. We just had our last run of Nexenta Core. Our primary purpose for Illumient is to find a replacement for Nexenta Core. Next slide. So this is a very short history. One of the nice things about the Solaris kernel, though, is it has a long history. It's about a 30-year-old kernel that's on open sourced. It's got a lot of nice features in it. It's got dtrace. It's got the ZFS file system in it. It's got fault management, service management, a lot of enterprise functionality and features built into this core kernel. So Nexenta, back to Nexenta. I said that was all I was going to talk about with Nexenta, was that they the whole company was based on the Open Solaris kernel, and so they built out the ZFS file system into an appliance, a software appliance that you could put on commodity hardware and have enterprise storage. A couple years later, Sun actually came out with a product that looked awful lot like it, because they were like two guys and their dog. They didn't. I don't think they ever tried to sue Sun for stealing their idea, but no. Just kidding. That was just a joke. This isn't being broadcast, is it? I'm not going to get in trouble. Yeah, okay. They also had, you know, the dtrace built in. If you're not familiar with what dtrace does, dtrace is in the kernel. There's like on my laptop, there's 30,000 probes that I can fire off into different parts of the kernel and get analytical data from it. So dtrace is actually a scripting language that's combined with the probes and then a scripting utility so that you can do some analysis of the data that you're seeing at those points. You can fire off all 30,000 probes if you want, but you will get a massive quantity of data back, right? So they built dtrace to allow you to parse through the data and then present it in whatever kind of format you want. So dtrace basically is a scripting language. We use a lot of dtrace even still at Nexenta to see what's going on inside of the file system, see what's going on inside of the applications. There's also zones. Zones allow you to have a very lightweight virtualization environment. Very little, very lightweight. A zone on my laptop boots in 0.1 seconds. So it's a very lightweight development environment, looks like an operating system, has an IP address, and looks as if it's a full running operating system. So as time went on, Nexenta maintained their own separate set of patches, separate from the Open Solaris kernel. When Sun was running Open Solaris, it wasn't really easy to get put back into that kernel. So they maintained their own set of patches for their product, and 2008 was when they started selling it as a product. But they also had a very, very mature iSCSI stack, just because they were, the iSCSI guys, and they had that much earlier than the Open Solaris kernel had that. So then to fit into the Debian model, they took and repackaged everything up in the Deb format, and then took all the kernel packages and left the Sun name on them, and just you could apt-get install Sun WZFS, get it that way. So the first few, up until version 3 of Nexenta Core platform, the packages were based on the Ubuntu 8 packages. We got over 13,000 of those packages in our repo. We also had tools for automation to take the Debian packages directly and convert them ever so slightly to run in this distribution. Built up a very large community around this and built out all these packages. Put some enhancements into some of the core server packages that we were using for our product, including changes to Apache, MySQL, and then added support for the SMF in our own utilities. And so looks like apt, any other apt, right? Next. Okay. So then some things happened. That's all the technology part of it. But even as Open Solaris, so I actually am a Sun engineer. I was a sales engineer for Sun. And as soon as we opened Solaris, there was a lot of controversy around it. Why are they doing this? Why is it out there? Why, are they going to take contributions? What are they doing? And there was always a large amount of controversy. When it first went out, it looked like Solaris. It had a CDE desktop in it. It had no utilities for wireless. So when was it? About 2006 or so, the Sun VPs went out and hired a guy to get Open Solaris to be more user-friendly for end users. He sat down with a guy in Indiana and asked him what were the problems that Solaris had to be more user-friendly, or to be, more like Ubuntu, or more like some of these Linux distributions. That guy was Ian Murdoch. I guess he sat down with him for about 6 hours and said, "What's wrong?" And Ian talked for like 6 hours. And then the next day he went out and hired him. And he said, "Hey, all that stuff that you told me that was wrong with Solaris, will you come here and fix it?" So Ian came to Sun in an effort to make a desktop environment that was easy to use for developers to use. That was the basis for the Open Solaris distro, and it also is the basis for Solaris 11. If you see IPS, if you know apt and you see IPS, the package management system inside of Solaris, it'll look real familiar to you, right? It's IPS install package name. So very, very similar. Got it a kind of grown-up desktop, got it GNOME, put some tools in there, some utilities to make it user-friendly on small x86 appliances. That's one of the things that not a lot of people know is that, Solaris on x86 ran just as good as it did on SPARC. As we move forward, all the development around Illumos is in the x86 space. We just really don't have any interest in SPARC. We have no investment in SPARC hardware. And I'll get more to Illumos as we move forward. So then Oracle came. I was a Sun employee when Oracle came in. As they started to come, we were told that they planned to keep all the communities intact. They were going to let us just run our business the way that we always ran it. But what actually happened was the Open Solaris community was abandoned. Oracle had no investment in the Open Solaris community. There was no plan to continue the Open Solaris community. There was no plan to continue. One of the things that Open Solaris was trying to do was open development, so cooperative open development with end users and anybody in the community. All of that came to an abrupt halt. So it went dead. The communication from Oracle, from engineers within Oracle, just went dead. And so companies like Nexenta, sitting on the outside, there's Nexenta, there's Joyent, there's Delphix, some people that had built companies around this Open Solaris kernel weren't sure what to do at this point because the communication had gone silent, that when they'd ask anybody, actually I was a engineer at the time, and they said to me that as an engineer, your job is not to discuss strategy with people. I was told that I could answer technical questions, but not strategic questions. So we knew very quickly that something odd had happened. When this happened, a lot of the kernel engineers, a lot of the sales engineers, a lot of the support engineers left. It just wasn't a good situation. I have 2 little kids at home, so I couldn't just leave. I would have liked to have just left, like some of the other ones, just up and left, but kind of had to wait around until I found something else. But all those kernel engineers left kind of en masse, but a lot of them still really love Solaris and love the core operating system that they had worked on. And many of them, so there's the Nexenta, Joyent, Evercity, Delphix, all companies that had built businesses around this core operating system, and many of them were disappointed, and me too. I think the saddest day of my life was the day when I went to sun.com and it said oracle.com. It just was a very, very sad. I was saying to the guys on the way over here in the car, I didn't cry when my kids were born, but I cried that day when I had to see the big red splash on my beloved son. So next page. So what happened? So we knew the kernel was open, right? I mean, the core kernel was open. There were a bunch of real kind of kludgy closed bits that we needed to make the kernel installable or fully a full kernel. So Nexenta actually funded the opening and the development of Illumos in August of 2010. So that our engineers could write those closed bits and create a fully open tree of Open Solaris. So what's left of Open Solaris now lives in Illumos. So illumos.org has been alive since August of 2010. In that, all the key components are opened. In that, there's been some distributions that have opened. There have been some forks that have taken place. Probably the most well-known distribution is the Open Indiana distribution, which isn't just the core kernel, but it's a whole distribution. It uses the IPS packaging system. It has a GNOME desktop, has all of the nice utilities from Solaris 11. So we had all of these other guys contributing into this community. So now the community is about, what, 1.5 years old. We have funding that they can send. I don't know why they send a chubby girl from Minnesota out here to Brussels to talk to you about Illumos, but we can do stuff like that now, right? We have, if you come over to our booth, we have some free T-shirts to give away. We have enough momentum, we have enough participation that even if, even if one of these players pulled out of Illumos, it wouldn't really matter because there's a triangle and there's enough people participating in this core community to keep it going and to keep it going probably perpetually. What we're looking for now, we're looking for more contributors. The nice thing about it is it's a fairly small community. If you're looking to contribute code somewhere, contribute documentation, contribute packaging, contribute anything in an open source project, this is a great place to be. You have some very senior engineers that will mentor and help you create things. We also have really good partnerships with some other communities, like the FreeBSD community is doing a lot in the ZFS area, where they're putting back fixes, changes, bugs back into the core Illumos kernel. We have partnerships with, even the few. It took me a minute for my brain to catch up with my mouth. So we also have partnerships with like the guys that are doing Fuse on Linux, and when they're finding bugs, when they're finding changes or fixes that need to be done, they're putting them back into Illumos so that the whole community is able to benefit from those changes. There are a number of, so off the top of my head, I know of 6, and I don't know why they always call them a super stealth startup, but I know of 6 other super stealth startups around the Illumos community that are putting back code and using this code in either OEM products or application-based products on top of this kernel. So there's a lot of participation. Oddly enough, there's some big money coming into it too to make sure that it stays and it continues to stay forever. So next. So, oh gosh, I had a slide for this. Came from Sun, didn't like what happened at Oracle, so we have some edicts in the community, things like no bike shedding, we call it a meritocracy. If you have code or if you have something you want to contribute, we just have you contribute. We don't like a lot of discussion. We don't like a lot of chatting. It's clean. It's open. It's a very, very transparent community. So we do have the different distributions, lots of cooperation with the FreeBSD community. FreeBSD has ported dtrace and ZFS into their core distribution. And we're getting, like I said, we're getting a lot of putbacks from those environments. So next slide. Thank you. So from a Nexenta point of view, we wanted to switch over to the Illumos community. We also have, oddly enough, people confuse Nexenta Core Platform with Nexenta Store, which is our commercial product. I don't know why they would do that, right? They're completely different words put together in a different way. So we wanted to take Nexenta Core, the Nexenta Core platform to the next level, to what we wanted to do from here. We also needed a distribution for our engineers to develop on. That's very similar to our end product. So the next version, since I started at Nexenta, my whole life has been kind of dedicated to this new distribution. Where to put it, how to develop it, who's going to develop it, where it's going to get done. All of those things have been questions that I've been trying to get answers to, including name. Man, has anybody in here ever had to try to name something? It's awful. I will never ever do that again. Whatever name you come up with, there's always 4 guys that hate it. And whatever you come up with, there's always 3 other ideas the day you decide. So we came up with the name Illumian. For the Illumos kernel plus the Debian packaging. So right now, if you go out to illumian.org, you can download the very basic minimal server install that really is just the Illumos kernel with the Debian packaging. We don't have, we're working on, actually I got that out yesterday. It was the first day you were able to download it. I'm actually, since I'm here and they're all in the US, I'm not sure if the repos are up yet. So I'm not sure if you app-get anything, if you'll get anything yet. Maybe give me a week or so. We're working on it. We have a repo somewhere. We actually have a couple mirrored sites that have volunteered. We just need to get the, what we have in the repo available to people externally. So maybe don't do it today. If you give me a break and not do it today, would be nice. One of the things that we've decided to do was to cooperate with Userland, with the Open Indiana guys, so that we could, have a pretty similar Userland, even though our stuff gets packaged up in Debian. But if we find bugs in the GNOME that we're both building, we can, both put back into the same gate, so that we can, have more cooperation with the different distributions. There's also StormOS. StormOS is something that has kind of had a vision. Andrew Stormont here, that is the what are you, the king? Do you get to be the king of StormOS? So the czar? Something like that. He does the StormOS, and his vision is, kind of the same, to have an easy-to-use desktop with a good, solid Solaris kernel underneath. So Storm will continue also. And then the Illumient really is the best basis for our commercial product called the Nexenta Store. So, next. So that's really all I have. I'm hoping that you guys have questions. This is the second time I've given this presentation, so I'm not really sure what people want to know. So I was kind of hoping that I give you enough to get you started on questions. Yeah. So the question was, have we stressed Solaris zones in? Okay. Yeah, I think they gave me a whole hour. Did I talk in like less than 10 minutes? What was that? Oh, good. I stretched it out.
I hadn't really phrased the question yet, so it was about, you had stressed the Solaris zones earlier on in your slides. Now in Illumient, do you actually support KVM like SmartOS does?
Yeah. So KVM got ported to the Illumos kernel, so it's not in the Solaris kernel at all. So KVM is now in the kernel source tree inside of Illumos, and so we built Illumient out of the more current version of Illumos. So I'm 90% sure that the KVM is there. Yeah.
And the second question is, could you explain with a bit more detail what the difference is between Illumient and Open Indiana? Because you said there was some cooperation going on. So is it just the different packaging, or are there some more?
Primarily the different packaging. That's, yeah.
Can I answer the question?
Sure.
We have makefiles for package 5, which is in Open Indiana. So the same packaging system like in Solaris 11 is in Open Indiana. And we have the packages are based on makefiles, and the makefiles are shared between Illumient and Open Indiana. So we just use a different method to install the packages, but the makefiles are just equal, which is a good thing. So we can work together. That's why we are sharing. Okay. Other questions?
I think one question that should be answered is also, what is the main difference between Illumient and the former Nexenta Core operating system where we had GNU Userland? And I think I'm not pretty much sure, but I think it's Open Indiana uses the Solaris toolchain, and it's also Illumient will not will not integrate that much of the GNU toolchain as it used.
And that's one of the reasons why we're going to continue to support StormOS, that's closer to that Nexenta Core, that has that more tightly wrapped GNU Userland.
Okay.
Yep. I got that right, didn't I, Andrew? Yeah. Okay. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, the GNU Userland it's included with Open Indiana and Illumient, and if you were to when you log in, its environment set so those are the default, but
You can change easily.
Yeah, in like if you were to look in like user bin, you would find the Solaris tools, whereas the GNU ones are in user GNU bin. Yeah.
Yeah, we had that at Sun too. People were always like, "Well, where are the GNU tools?" And they've been in Solaris for quite some time. They just weren't in the default path, so people couldn't find them. So one of the things they did with Solaris 11 was the same thing as open up the path, so that it's the default path is easy to find those utilities and tools.
I have a question. There's more than one packaging system running on top of Illumos, is that right? Illumian is one, and I think Joyent is working on a second one that's completely different.
Yeah, so the joint one, the packaging system that they're using is roughly based on some BSD packaging. So theirs is different also, right? So the one thing that we're sharing with all the distribution is the core kernel, and then adding different packaging utilities on top of that.
Do you have some words on why they chose to, why there are more than one packaging?
Actually, I would love to give you the words, but I asked them. I'm like, well, why are you guys doing it? And they're like, because we like to. I mean, there was no strategy, there was no design around it. It just was something that they were used to using, and they continued using. So there's no reason, right? It's just like any. I mean, usually in corporations, you have good reasons for doing things. In open source projects, it's like, this is the thing I'm more familiar with, so this is what I'm going to use. Yeah. Oh, you can. So we can have some more. We have a lot of people here from the Illumos community, so.
What about the package source on
Joyent?
right?
Yeah.
Giant.
Because we actually asked them, the Joint guys, I had a couple of meetings with them to see if they would, kind of share in some of the work around the Debian packaging or the IPS packaging. And it's like, why do you guys need a third packaging? And what they told me was, like that.
I think Giant's use of package source predates Open Solaris. They were starting on Solaris Express
Yeah, that's right. They
Developer
started in a,
Edition,
like a-
which was using even more ancient packaging system. So they chose package source from NetBSD because it was already there, already working, and there was no better alternative. And they, I think, continued using it up until now.
Okay, thanks. Question in the back. Got to keep asking the questions, because I've got plenty of time. You don't want me to stand up here and start talking about my kids. My kid's 11, and he can go potty in the big chair now. Yay! Well, we support Spark. So right now, there's no reason to support Spark. Probably the core contributors to Illumos are mostly running on x86. I know our kit runs on x86. The Joyent stuff runs on x86. There has to be a reason for it, for people to push it. So, question?
Yeah,
Yeah.
hi.
Hi.
I spent like a year and a half using Open Solaris as my development box, and I was very impressed. This was years ago, and I was very impressed with it also as a server platform. And had a lot of stuff that either the various Linux distros at the time didn't have, or was criminally hard to use. Stuff like Zone, ZFS, and something you didn't mention was Crossbow.
Oh yeah,
networking,
Crossbow stuff is beautiful.
stack.
Yep.
I wonder, it was in many ways ahead of a lot of the Linux distros at the time, but given all the stuff that's happened now, has it lost some of its advantage, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, you guys probably could answer that question better than I can. I'm not sure if the Linux distros have something that's like Crossbow. Do they have, do we have network virtualization, resource management in Linux? We do have something that's similar to, you have the BSD jails, which, have always kind of been there. You have like the SE Linux stuff that's similar to Zones. Some of the stuff though that you don't see, I mean, you see System Tab coming up, but it's still not as mature or as robust as what we have, the 5, 6, 7-year-old Solaris. still is quite a ways ahead in what you see in the Linux distros. As far as file systems are concerned too, I watch all the new file systems that come out. I haven't seen anything that looks even remotely close to ZFS, where you'll see like the Butter file system, the ButterFS has the copy on write, but it doesn't have checksums, it doesn't have compression, it doesn't have snapshots. And then you'll have, something else that will have the checksums, but I haven't seen another file system that has that kind of complete package that's, just so easy to use. So we have the dtrace, we have the ZFS, and then the one thing I don't even see anybody working on, which is probably my favorite part of Solaris, is the fault manager, which has the ability to offline CPUs. Now, in x86 in 2005, offlining CPUs and keeping the box up and operational wasn't that interesting for x86 because most of the boxes had one CPU at the time, maybe two. Now you see boxes with, I actually, in my closet upstairs, I have an 8-way x86 box, right? I mean, it's very common. And as you see these bigger chassis coming out, the ability to offline a CPU and keep the box up is very important, especially when people are putting, cloud deployments on that, where they're putting hundreds of applications out on that, and you have a CPU failure and you have the box drop. That's a bad day. So the fault management is very mature. We can offline CPU, memory, PCI, NICs, HBAs, and keep the box up and operational. And then you can schedule downtime at some point and get those components fixed. But that really comes from the Spark roots I don't know about you guys, but I went into sales engineering because I hate getting paged in the middle of the night, when stuff fails. So we wanted to be able to offline that stuff and not have the box panic. So that's one of the things that's still there, that's still more mature than, even 7-8 years later after Solaris 10 Solaris 10 launched, still probably best of the breed in the industry.
Right. So I guess what you're saying is that even if the technological development had stagnated because of the whole, death of Open Solaris and its reincarnation, it doesn't matter because it was so far ahead of the rest anyway.
Well, I hate to sound braggy like that. I come from the Midwestern part of the United States, and they don't let us brag very. I think that we think that we will burn somewhere if we brag. But if I had to say it, I would say, yeah. I think the technology, the innovation that was put into Solaris 10, it was $500 million worth of engineering that went into Solaris 10 when it came out. A lot of innovation, a lot of some pretty amazing things. Now that we have the Illumos kind of up and operational too, we have all the people that kind of created some of that original innovation now thinking about the next generation of problems too. And they're doing it in the wide open. And they're, one of the things that we didn't have at Sun was that ability to really talk to end users and what do you guys need? What should we do next? What's the next big innovation? Where should we go from here? And because the community is still pretty small, we have, we have the ability to have the conversation and, see what we should build next. Because we love innovation more than anything else. More than my kids. I love the innovation. Actually, I have 11-year-old twin boys. They're hard to love at that age. Really hard.
One question was a bit with Nexenta Core because of the problems with the namings, etc. Is how is Nexenta as a business related to Illumient? How free will it be, or is it directed? I mean, is it something like Fedora is to Red Hat? And how?
No, so what we want to do with Illumient right now is a project off of Illumos. So it's illumos.org/project/Illumient is how you get to the Illumient. What we're really hoping for Illumient is for it to be a company, or not a company, a community-owned project. So it's completely free, completely open, and, you know, ready for use and criticism and, you know, all the things that go on in an open source community.
So it's not that Nexenta will make releases as they did with Nexenta Core. And I think that was the problem, because if someone from the community wanted to contribute, it was very difficult. It's
Right.
similar to Open Solaris, I would say.
At the time, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so the process for contributing now goes through the gates and the process for Illumos, and we're just, you know, becoming a sub-project off of Illumos. We're kind of lucky in the fact that, I mean, Open Indiana started before Illumos got opened, and, you know, Joyent started way before. We're kind of coming into this later in the game and saying, you know, we'll make this a project off of Illumos, and, you know, look for community contributions. And we're looking, really, you know, there are bosses inside of Nexenta that are saying, you know, we want this to be fully community, and you know, see how much participation we'll get. But we're ready to pick up the ball if things don't get done. And we have some ideas of what we want to do with it. You know, Andrew and I spent most of, I don't want to say last night, you know, talking about what we want to do with Illumian. And, you know, some of the things we want to do with it is get it, you know, look for some interesting desktop to put on it. Let's look for some server software that's kind of outside of the mainstream. Let's make it interesting. Let's try to see, you know, where people may want it to go. And, you know, this does sound really arrogant, what I'm about to say, but, you know, I want it to be what I want it to be. I want to be able to run it on my laptop and use it for the things that I do in my daily life. So, and I want it to be fun and interesting and intriguing. So where we go from here, I don't know. You know, sky's the limit. Yeah.
So I think it's also what Garrett, the initiator of Illumos, said. Okay, it's not an Nexenta thing, and that was the most important message that he always had to repeat. It's not Nexenta; it's an open source project.
Right.
So it's the same message you make
Right.
with Illumin.
Yeah. So Garrett recently left Nexenta. I don't know what that means, but you know, he doesn't have to say it's not Nexenta anymore because he's spending full time on Illumos, and he's in one of those super stealth startups. You know, we're going to put back into Illumian, but we're going to see ourselves. We see ourselves in the Illumos community. I'm on the kind of corporate strategy team. So strategically, we see ourselves as a member of Illumos. Having Garrett leave kind of helps in the fact that we can be seen as a member of Illumos now. We're just a member, just like everybody else, and we plan on continuing to contribute to Illumos. We plan to, you know, back it up with, you know, some cash here and there if we have to. We're going to do what's necessary to make sure that it continues to be a vital community. But we're like, one of the problems with having Garrett be an Nexenta employee was the fact that he was the founder of Illumos. He owns the trademark to Illumos. Getting Illumos and Nexenta confused was very difficult then. Not anymore, right? We don't have those kinds of problems. I shouldn't have to, because I don't own this. I had to ask Garrett's permission to have the T-shirts printed. So.
Hi.
Question.
The version control system for the software of Illumian, what version control system is used at the moment?
Anybody got an answer to that?
I Git or whatever.
Mercurial.
Mercurial. Okay. All right. Okay. And the other thing, where is ZFS up to? What sort of level in terms of how it ties up with where Open Solaris was and the change over to Oracle?
So I think it's version 28, if I'm not incorrect. Yeah. And so the Oracle release of Solaris 11 came out with a 31. One of the things that the ZFS, so the majority of the ZFS engineers that were working at Sun are now working in Illumos. And we see that we may have some compatibility problems. They're working on something called disk label versions. So there's going to be a label on the disk that you can look at so that you can say, oh, this has come from Oracle. The feature flags. Everybody keeps having to remind me what that's called. It's called feature flags. right? So you'll be able to look at the disk label and say, oh, this is version 31. It's come from Oracle. It's probably got crypto. I may need to just open it read-only. So we're working about, being able to look at different, so the guys that actually built in that kind of backward compatibility for ZFS are now mostly working at Delphix. And they're building out some of these utilities to make sure that all ZFS file systems can be read by all platforms, so you don't have to go, oh, this is a 31, I can't use it. When I left Oracle, I backed up my laptop and I forgot that I was running 31. So
Actually,
I was like, crap, could you guys do the feature flags this weekend? I need the stuff off there.
We are facing some problems with ZFS in terms of development, because when you're in a certain version and you want to implement new features, you need a certain way to go to the new world and then come back. So that's why we have invented the feature flags, like, let's say, like Linda explained. And in some ways we are better than Oracle, because at the moment we have iSCSI Unmap, which Oracle doesn't have. And
we also have the ability to shut off on SCSI Unmap, or
Yes.
iSCSI Unmap.
Yes, and we have the ZFS test suite was open sourced by Sun in 2008, and then left there. They did not do anything special with it, and now it got resurrected by Joyent, and it's built up again as a full testing suite for ZFS. So we are getting better and better every day. Yeah. Yes.
Yep.
We used to call it iZFS, Illumion ZFS.
And then I also know from being an Oracle employee, there was no way that I could get you that source code, right? Unless you were an OEM, and you wrote me a really large check to get the source code. So, there's a lot of discussion on our IRC channels in our lists around, what Oracle plans to do with the source. They're bound by the same license we are. They should be open sourcing Solaris 11. Actually, they had, I think it was like 60 days after the time that the product shipped. And we still haven't seen any source. So we'll see what happens. Because the only one that can really sue them is them or us. And we're, there's a joke inside of Nexenta that Oracle is like a big gorilla with a bazooka. You just try not to piss them off, right? You try not to get them to point the bazooka your way. So,
Any more questions?
questions? I seem to have more minutes. Okay. Well, thank you for your time. We've got a booth over on the K building on the upper level. If you want to come over, we got free t-shirts to give away. I wanted to bring yo-yos, but they made me take t-shirts. So if you want a t-shirt, come on over and we can talk about Illumos all day. So thank you.